So hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I was tagged by Jack over at Spreadbook Joy to take part in the end of year book tag. So I am really keen to get to these 6 questions, and I have a number of books in front of me that are linked to my end of year reading. Question 1 is, are there any books that you started this year that you still need to finish? I'm looking at quite a pile actually. First one on top of the pile is to do with my DIY literature degree. So key areas of study this year have been the Gothic, Victorian literature, and also fairy tales. I forgot for a moment. So I have been reading this little book, which is actually really useful. This is by Keith Selby, How to Study a Charles Dickens Novel. So I've read the introduction, which kind of tells you some of the key themes in Dickens, and then it shows you how to find those themes in a number of set books. The problem is I have yet to read all of the Charles Dickens books, and I don't want to spoil it myself. So I've read the introduction, I've read a discussion on Hard Times, because I've read Hard Times. I have read halfway through the chapter on Great Expectations, so I could finish that. Also chapter 4 is about Bleak House, so I could finish that as well. Chapter 5 is on Martin Chuzzlewit, that will have to wait till next year. And then Dombey and Son, and then in the back there is a how to write an essay. So to get this finished without spoiling myself, I need to finish reading the Great Expectations chapter, read the Bleak House chapter, and then I can read how to write an essay as well. Then the other 2 chapters will have to wait till I've read those books next year. So I would just like to get this reading up to date, because that is a really useful little book. And around also that key area of study, I only started the very beginning of this. I read chapter 1 in, this is a Palgrave Key Concepts in Victorian Literature book by Sean Purchase. The opening chapter is just the general introduction, and even in the general introduction I found some really great contextual information about the Victorian era that really did impact my reading, and that's just the introduction. So I would like to get at least one secondary source finished to say that I've read at least one secondary source for Victorian literature before the end of the year. So this is on there, and this is, like I said, hardly touched. I've only read up to page 11. So 2 secondary sources there for Victorian study, and I've got another 2 secondary sources as well for Gothic literature. So I've got Sue Chaplin's book on Gothic literature, and I've got Angela Wright's book on Gothic fiction. So Angela Wright's book I've got up to page 17 out of 142. This I think is a bit drier, it's a bit harder to digest, but this one I am absolutely loving. This is actually my current read alongside Anne Radcliffe's The Mysteries of Udolpho. So this is quite a chunker. This is like 680 pages. This one is just over 300 pages. I'm up to page 81, and I am loving it so far. You can see I've tabbed it to death. I have written all over it as well. I'm loving it. Oh my goodness, this is the book that made me realise I've been missing a trick, to be honest. I've been missing a trick with my literature studies this year. Secondary sources are fascinating, and it's just added so much to reading the Anne Radcliffe that I'm reading. I love it. So I don't think this is going to be any problem to finish, because I'm loving reading it. I would love to get to both of them before the end of the year, just so I can say, like in my Victorian literature I've read 2 secondary sources, in my Gothic literature I've read 2 secondary sources, and of course I've got Anne Radcliffe to finish as well. I am up to page 295 at the moment. I am savouring this. I'm taking my time, so I'm really loving this one. Okay, other books I still haven't finished. So I read Elizabeth Gaskell's Lois the Witch earlier in the year. I also read The Old Nurse's Story, which I made no notes on. And I made no notes and totally forgot it. So I think that's a lesson there in how important note taking is for my memory aid. So I would like to reread The Old Nurse's Story, The Squire's Story, The Crooked Branch, The Grey Woman, and I think that's it. So would love to finish reading some of these little tales by Elizabeth Gaskell. To say I've read all the tales in this one. One that is like the bane of my life. I am literally up to the last chapter. I only have that much left to read. In Peter Barry's Beginning Theory, an introduction to literary and cultural theory. Oh my gosh, it says it's an introduction, it says it's a beginner's book, but oh boy have I found this book difficult. It has pushed me so much out of my comfort zone. In fact, the first bit I've actually read twice and I still don't really understand it, but I would like to finish the last chapter just to say I slogged on through and read it all. Who knows, third time might be a charm for reading, but yeah, this has been a struggle bus. In October I started reading Emily Bronte's poems, reading it slowly. I still have quite a way to go, but I would really like to read Emily Bronte's poems and get this book finished, because one of my goals for the year was to read all the works of the Brontes. I've read all the novels now. While we are talking about that, I will also talk about this massive tome of Juliet Barker's biography of the Brontes. The goal was to read all the novels, to read Emily's poems, and to read the biography. I did start this biography. I think I got about 60 pages in. It was going to be for my Juicy June prompt for my own personal reading challenge, the Candy Reading Challenge. I'm just not going to get to this. So what I am doing, because this is the biggest Anne Radcliffe that I've got, and it is nearly 700 pages, I'm going to put this in as my Juicy June book, because there is no way I'm even going to attempt to finish this. I really need to restart it. I've forgotten the beginning of the book, so that's going to go onto next year's list. I'm not going to attempt that, but I would like to attempt this. And then I've got one more still. So I've got Shakespeare's Wife by Germaine Greer, which is taking me a while to read because I am really trying to make sure that it stays in my memory. So I'm writing copious notes as I read this. I'm loving it. So I've got about 160 pages through this. I would like to finish this one as well before the start of next year. So you can see, oh my gosh, that is quite a lot of reading that I've started that I would love to finish. I think we're in the realm of fantasy here, guys, because I don't think I'm going to get to all of that, but it's a challenge. Question number 2 is, do you have an autumnal book to transition you into the end of the year? Well, to be honest, it's really an autumnal theme of books. I love reading the Gothic. Over the last couple of years, I've taken part in GothLitNovember event run by Rachel over at the channel Second Thoughts About the Mission. If you haven't visited Rachel's channel yet, I'll link it below. She's fabulous, and I just love reading Gothic literature at this time of year and extending it through December and January and February. I just think this transition into the new year is just perfect. It's liminal, it's a change of year, so it's perfect for liminal reading or Gothic literature. So I think any Gothic literature book will do that, but I think taking part in the event GothLitNovember is my favourite thing on YouTube. I just love it. So yeah, my Anne Radcliffe read totally hitting the spot for that transition. Question number 3 is there a new release that you're waiting on? No, I don't read new release books. I am a charity shop book buying girl through and through. For me, I'm catching up with my DIY literature degree on classics that I haven't read in my lifetime, and having abandoned my reading for decades, it's just really nice to get back to titles that I've heard of. So classics really, not new release, or if they are new release, it's just what I find in charity shops, so that really doesn't apply to me. Question number 4 is 3 books that you want to read before the end of the year. Well, I've showed you the books that I've partially read so far, but I do have a number of reading goals as well, of books that I would like to get to before the end of the year. Surprise, surprise, there are more than 3. Nobody's surprised, let's face it. So there's more than 3 because I'm thinking about my reading goals I set at the start of the year. So like I said, one of my areas of study was Gothic literature. I very quickly reduced it down to early Gothic and the work of Anne Radcliffe. One of my goals was to read all of the works of Anne Radcliffe this year. So this is the last of her 4 key novels that I've got to finish, so this is a must finish. I also have the slightly shorter first novel, which I don't think is as popular or as widely read as her 4 key novels. So I've got The Castles of Athelin and Dunbayne, so it's only a short novel, so I would like to finish that. And then all that I've got left to read then is the posthumous works of Anne Radcliffe, which I treated myself for my birthday, which is coming up. Next Sunday is my birthday. So in this book you've got Gaston de Blondeville, which is a romance. You've got some stories at St Albans Abbey. You've got a memoir of the authoress with extracts from her private journals as well in there. There's a little bit of journal writing from her, there's writing about her, and then there's her, I think it's a novella, some short stories in there. So those 3 books there are just my Anne Radcliffe goals. If I read that, then I've finished that goal. However, having read Sue Chaplin's Gothic literature non-fiction, oh my gosh, it was so interesting finding out about the battle between Matthew Lewis and Anne Radcliffe. These 2 books, The Mysteries of Udolpho and also The Monk, are linked. It also links into the Italian. There was a little sort of literary fisticuffs going on. So I would really love to get to Matthew Lewis as well, The Monk, in amongst this Anne Radcliffe reading before the end of the year, and then bring a video about the fisticuffs between the 2 of them, which I just thought was amazing. So there's a lot of Gothic reading there. However, also with the Victorian reading, 2 key authors, Thomas Hardy and Charles Dickens. I am taking part in Jen the Librarian's Thomas Hardy read along this month. So in November we've got The Return of the Native to read. I haven't even started this yet. And then in December we've got The Trumpet Major to read. So I've got 2 Thomas Hardys that are essential reads. I can't not read these 2. And I've also got to think about my Dickens reading and also the challenge reading I've been doing. So my own personal Candy Reading Challenge. I've also been doing the Read Good challenge as well. So the Read Good prompt for December is Decembros, a book about brothers. So I, for that book, have picked the Pickwick Papers to read, which is nearly 800 pages, but it's always been planned in for December, to read this in December. And then Alan over at AlansReads and Julie at Bookish Travels, they are hosting together the Dickens at Christmas event, which is to read something to do with Dickens at Christmas. They've suggested a Christmas Carol, but their read-along book is the Pickwick Papers. So I am definitely going to read this one. I am joining in with that event. But then on top of that, we have another Dickens event. We have the Ghosts of Christmas Past event, which is run by Pat over at Book Chat with Pat, Vin at AlansReads, Elaine at Cobalt Dragon, and Debs at Raina Reads Stuff. Lots and lots of Dickens events at Christmas, and of course Dickens has probably been the most important reading of my year so far. So I have got the complete ghost stories of Charles Dickens, which I would love to get to for one of those events, and also the Christmas books to read as well. So we've got 3 Dickens to get through, as well as 2 Thomas Hardy. So for my prompt for the Candy reading challenge, it is December. So a book that is, it's either got winter on the cover or is linked to winter in some way. I have put down for my challenge book to read Elizabeth Gaskell's Ruth, because look, she's walking through snow. I love that cover. I am really keen to read another Elizabeth Gaskell because I read North and South and read Lois the Witch. Loved both of those. So impressed with Elizabeth Gaskell's writing. So I'm just really keen to get to another Elizabeth Gaskell. And I also have a buddy read planned in December. So this is a must read book. I am going to read with a couple of people on BookTube Anthony Trollope's Marion Fay, which I know nothing about. I love going into these classics completely blind, but this is a buddy read, so that's a must read as well. I am beginning to feel like this is just ridiculous. And then there's one and a bit more areas as well. I really didn't want to finish this year without adding a little bit more reading to my fairy tale study, and just like with my Victorian reading and the Gothic reading, I wanted to read sort of a secondary source book. So one of the key books I'd love to get to, considering that my focus area has been Little Red Riding Hood, is to read the Jack Zipes book, The Trials and Tribulations of Little Red Riding Hood, which is basically the history of Little Red Riding Hood through various tales. And alongside that, I would absolutely love to get to The Uses of Enchantment by Bruno Bettelheim, the meaning and importance of fairy tales. I would love to get to these two. And as part of that, I have the second book in the duology of For the Throne. The first book is For the Wolf, which I read in January. I would love to finish this kind of Little Red Riding Hood retelling as well for this year. I'm not going to get to all of these because I also have 2 books I still need to read for my Taylor Swift book club as well. The Pinocchio, The Adventures of Pinocchio, and Palladian, a Gothic Elizabeth Taylor novel. So you can see I have 5 books that are linked to either my book club or my fairy tale reading. I have 5 books linked to Thomas Hardy and Charles Dickens, and I have 4 books linked to the Gothic reading still. Loads and loads of books there. I am definitely not going to get to it all. I'm going to leave them all out and see how far down the pile I can get by the start of next year. Question number 5 is there a book in amongst that you think could shock you or become a favourite by the end of the year? Definitely, I think Matthew Lewis's The Monk is going to shock me. I have a basic understanding of some of the premise of this story, some of the themes in this story. I think the trigger warnings for this book could be as big as the book itself from what I understand about the book. So this one I think is going to shock me. The Mysteries of Adolfo might become a new favourite. I'm loving it so far. So the Gothic, I think, could shake up the year a little bit. And then finally, the question number 6 is, have you started making plans for next year's reading? Oh yes, I have. I've got an entire section in my folder of study all based on next year's reading. Also I planned out my DIY literature degree course for year 2, which I'm going to bring lots of videos about that, lots of videos about the wrap up of year 1. But for now I'm going to leave it there. I think this video is long enough. So we're just finishing the year as we started, with a ridiculously large TBR, but isn't it nice to have the choice of some wonderful books? Tell me what key books you're most looking forward to before the end of the year. I'd love to know. And thanks so much for watching and listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye.